Hello, everybody. Welcome in. I'm just going to give it a couple of, beats for folks to trickle in to today's solution spotlight. We were just talking while you all were waiting in the waiting room about our weekends, and it sounds like the majority of us have been on the conference circuit and just needed that decompression time for the weekend. But Allison actually did something super fun and went to a WNBA game final, I believe it was. So she won.
Yeah, it was great. And those of you who were in Minneapolis last week might have seen some of the earlier games, which were very exciting too.
Nice. All righty. So it is 11:01 my time. We have much to get through, so I am going to just kick us off. Welcome to today's Solution Spotlight, titled Navigating Change: Insights from the Betterment Advisor Solutions 2024 Advisor Survey. Joining us today are folks from the Betterment Solutions Advisors team. So Thomas Moore, Devin Klum, and just to set the stage, this partnership between XYPN and Betterment is a game changer for financial advisors. By combining XYPN support for independent advisors with Betterment's all-in-one platform for RIAs, clients benefit from a streamlined approach to wealth management. And this collaboration provides advisors with the tools and support to serve more clients effectively in investing, retirement, and cash management, helping them create customized financial strategies to meet client needs. I will let our guests introduce themselves. So I want to review some housekeeping items before really turning it over to them. Below is, you'll see the chat tab and the Q&A tab. Drop any of your questions in the Q&A tab. Allison will be moderating them as they come up, or just waiting until the end of the presentation to address any of your questions. So you can also upvote questions as appropriate, but just throughout this presentation, if you do have questions, feel free to drop them in. They will be answered. Next, we have some upcoming events on the XYPN side. November 6th is another solution spotlight. What is a donor advised fund? The benefits of incorporating DFAs or DAFs into your investment advice. And then November 12th, gain a competitive edge, real-time client spending insights for advisors with Monarch Money. And that is another solution spotlight. I will drop both of those links for you to register in the chat. And then XYPN is having a Learn to Launch office hours on November 20th with our own success strategists. So if you are thinking about joining membership, then this is a great use of your time just to get in front of our own business development folks. And I will drop that as well. And then XYPN Live 2024, it just happened last week. I miss it already. I'm counting down the days for 2025. But you can get your tickets for the next live, which is going to be in Austin, Texas. And this is the lowest that the price is going to be all year. $3.99 for XYPN members and $5.99 for non-members. Registration link will be in the chat, and feel free to grab your tickets as you see fit. Okay, and with that, I am going to get off this proverbial stage and turn it over to Thomas and Devin and Allison. Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here so that we can get into it. So, hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name's Allison Considine, and I lead partnerships here at Betterment Advisor Solutions. So we are very excited to be here today to talk to you all about the results from our first annual advisor survey. This was a new initiative for us this year and something that we plan to do each year moving forward, because we think that there's a lot to be learned from it, both for our team as well as for advisors. There's kind of benefits on both sides. For advisors, it's always good to kind of, see some industry data for benchmarking and understanding industry trends. And then for our team, we're always looking to learn as much as we can about the advisors we serve so that we can continue to build solutions that meet their needs and solve the problems that they're facing. So to that end, we focused our survey on the same advisors that we're focused on serving here at Betterment, which are small independent RIAs. We are, kind of laser focused on providing great technology and great support for RIAs under 250 million in AUM as they look to grow and scale their practices. And so that was the focus here. And we focused on this cohort especially because we think that these advisors are kind of the next generation of wealth management. And, understanding the challenges and opportunities they face as they try to scale their businesses can help us to build solutions that are geared towards them. So as Sarah mentioned before, I'm joined by two of my colleagues here who are going to cover the results today. First, we have Tom Moore, who's the head of Advisor Solutions here at Betterment. So Tom has been responsible for building and scaling our organization on the advisor side across both wealth and retirement solutions for RIAs, and has spent many years in business development roles at various financial institutions prior to joining Betterment. So happy to have him here with us. And then we also have Devin Klum, who's our head of sales for the advisor business. So Devin leads a team of sales executives who some of you may have worked with to implement Betterment into your practices. And before joining the team, Devin actually worked with clients as an advisor himself and was a former XYPN member. So he knows the perspective very well and the challenges that you all are facing and brings that to bear in his role every day. So thanks, Tom and Devin, for being here. All right. Okay, so Sarah mentioned this too, but please drop questions in the chat box or the Q&A as we go through. I'm going to be keeping an eye out as Tom and Devin are going through the content to see if there's anything that we can work into the relevant sections. And then if not, we'll also spend plenty of time on Q&A at the end. So the more questions, the better. We want to know what's on your minds, and it's better if it's, more interactive as we go through because there's a lot of content today. And with that, to just kind of tee it up before I pass to Tom and Devin, I want to double click a little bit on who we surveyed so that you all have the context here on the responses that we're going through as you see the data. So as I mentioned, we wanted to focus on small independent RIAs. So all of the advisors we surveyed are independent. Many of them broke away from larger institutions at some point, and they currently manage between 10 million and 250 million in AUM. So you can see some high-level stats here. It was 500 advisors, and they are predominantly male, predominantly millennials, and then the vast majority are in the first decade of their career as an advisor, with the bulk of them with 5 to 10 years or so of experience as an advisor. We also asked why these advisors chose to go independent and start their own firms, and you can see there are a range of reasons, but the top one is the freedom and flexibility that it affords them. And then when we double click, there are a couple of interesting trends on the reasons for going independent if you split it by generation or by gender. So on the left-hand side here, you can see the split by generation from the respondents, and on the right-hand side by gender. So I think the key takeaways here on the left-hand side, you can see that younger advisors were more likely to go independent for access to better technology, which is probably no surprise to you all, using the XY tech stack and everything, that can be a big motivator to kind of upgrade the tools that you're using. And then on the right-hand side, when it comes to gender, you can see that female advisors were more likely to go independent in order to maximize their earning potential. So perhaps there were caps or challenges there being part of larger institutions that went away when women advisors decided to start their own firm. So in terms of the key takeaways here, again, we think that these advisors that we surveyed are representative of kind of the next generation because they're in growth mode, they're looking to scale their practices, and they view technology as a critical way to do that. And then at the same time, because they're independent rather than being part of a larger institution, they have complete control over their tech stack. So they can choose whatever tech they want, make changes when they want, and do whatever is best. So they have that freedom and flexibility. So because of that, the advisors that we're surveying are curious about technology, and they're among some of the most tech-enabled firms in the industry. So they can help advisors of a similar size and stage understand how to stay ahead of the curve, how to take advantage of technology, and set their practices up for long-term success. So with that as background, let's get into the results here. So I'm going to pass it over to Tom to cover the first section here about how advisors are using technology.
Oh, classic. I was on mute. Thanks, Allison. Thanks for teeing it up. I'll say right at the top, a couple things. Well, first off, it was great hanging out with everybody at the XYPN live event in Minneapolis last week. Thought there was some awesome thought leadership in the breakout sessions, and it gets me really excited that we're doing surveys like this. Obviously, this is our inaugural version of our advisor survey, but we plan to do it for many years to come. And it was just great hearing from a cohort of advisors that I think is reflective of the XYPN community to understand kind of what the priorities are, what the concerns are, what prevailing trends look like, and how we can kind of fit into that conversation. So Allison did a great job laying out the specifics around the survey, and I was going to speak to some of the findings. We wanted to start with technology, and I think when you're going to start with technology, a good foundational place to begin is at the custodian, which really is sort of the hub of the tech stack as we think about it. Maybe a little self-serving since that's where we fit into the picture, but important nonetheless as new advisors and existing advisors look for how to start and evolve their practice. So let's start at the top. What custodians are this group of advisors using? So you can see how the survey results laid out here. A couple of takeaways. I think the first is that you'll notice that all of these numbers add up to a lot more than 100%, right? So what that indicates, which we know, is that the majority of advisors and firms are multi-custodial, right? So they're using one or more of these options, oftentimes for specific purposes. On top of that, you can see that the big legacy players, the Fidelities, Schwabs of the world, still have pretty strong market share in this cohort. But I think what's maybe more interesting is the plethora of options that you do see here, and that from left to right all the way across, these firms have decent market share. So if you kind of look on the right-hand side, the Betterment, Axos, Altruis of the world, this is sort of the new challenger cohort. And I think we can see that these folks are gaining market share. And I think the net effect of this is positive for advisors and for advisor clients, right? I think challengers breed innovation, new solutions, better ways of doing things. And so I think the more options and the more competition in the market, I think advisors stand to gain and to win from that. So interesting kind of initial results there. Then we go into satisfaction. I think there's kind of a glass half full, glass half empty versions of interpreting this data. On the glass half full side, pretty much across the board, people are satisfied with their custodian, right? And I think the gap between being satisfied and very satisfied is pretty uniform throughout. I think the glass half empty, or maybe the opportunity here, is that there is no one that is out in front of the pack. And I think what this could indicate is that custodians have gotten good at serving their basic function as a custodian, but differentiation, I think, is still an opportunity. I think it's our opportunity and various others. And so, I would hope that we see that to the advisor's benefit and advisor's clients' benefits. I would hope we see that dynamic starting to emerge as we move forward. Next, kind of expanding the conversation beyond the custodian. So we laid out, 8 or 9 different softwares that advisors commonly use to understand how important you all think these tools are and how they rank against each other. A couple things to note. One, you guys think all of these tools are very, very important, right? So every one of them was listed over 44% as very important to your business. I think it's pretty interesting to see how many tools folks are using, right? So this is not even an exhaustive list, but this would indicate that a lot of firms are using as many as 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different tools, which we know to be the case. And then if you look at them stack ranked from most important to least, I think you can see that the tools that emerge, billing functionality, financial planning, performance reporting, are tools that are critical to daily operations of the firm and are tools that amplify the advisors or your value proposition. Things like financial planning software for financial planning focused firms, tax management tools to help you add more value. So I think it's interesting to see how these rank alongside each other and how that is reflective of kind of the typical and evolving business model. Support. So maybe not a technology tool by definition, but I think support always goes hand in hand with software providers, right? Because advisors have always viewed support as critical, a critical part of the offering that vendors provide. And I think what's interesting here is you see a dispersion across Gen X and Boomer advisors and younger emerging millennial advisors, where the older advisors actually put a higher value or more emphasis on support and support expectations. I don't necessarily think this means that millennial and Gen Z advisors expect less from their providers, but I think it may be reflective of their different expectations around what support is, right? The more tech forward millennial and Gen Z advisors may be more comfortable with self-service platforms than their older counterparts. And I think that's kind of fleshing out in this data interestingly. How do advisors value custodians, or how do they think about the custodial value proposition? So there's some interesting takeaways here as well. And the way we categorize this was by high growth firms, and then firms who are less focused on growth or were achieving lower growth percentages. And I think the interesting takeaways here, you can see that across the board, right? So from firms that are growing over 25% a year to those that are growing less than 10%, everyone thinks of the custodian's value prop as driving efficiency for them and facilitating their ability to serve more clients. I think where we see more dispersion here is in how they think about the custodian creating that sort of efficiency. And a couple of examples of this are things like freeing up time to serve clients. I think a more growth-minded firm, or a firm that's growing more effectively, is more focused on leveraging technology, including their custodian, to facilitate and maybe automate administrative tasks so that they can focus more time on serving their clients. And I think the obvious answer there is that the more time you spend with clients, the more you grow your business. And I think the other interesting takeaway here, where we see pretty significant dispersion, is in investment management expertise, right? So this would indicate that a higher growth firm is leaning more on their custodian for investment management expertise. And I think we've seen that play out on the Betterment platform, right? Those folks that are kind of outsourcing investment management are able to spend more time on prospecting, able to spend more time on bringing new folks into the practice and serving them well. What are challenges? So I think this is an important one, especially for those of you out there that are kind of going through your initial due diligence process with vendors, or maybe who are reevaluating platforms that you've used for some time now. You can see how this group ranked biggest challenges in implementing and onboarding new technology. To me, the interesting ones here, I think the top one, right? Expectations versus reality, I'll call this. This is always something to be aware of. I think everybody pitches service and kind of sells the dream up front, but you really learn more when it comes to implementing and engaging with the post-sale teams about what you can expect. So certainly be aware of kind of this expectation versus reality dynamic. I think another interesting one that we know is an age-old challenge is managing change with clients. I think advisors and vendors like us always, no matter how much emphasis we put on this, we still undervalue the power of inertia and the difficulty in managing change, especially with end clients. So I think those are two, and then the third I would point out here is time spent on implementation and training. I think we find, at least in our business, that most of our clients underestimate the amount of time that they're going to spend on implementation and training and understanding how to really utilize the system. And I think the net effect there can be a couple of things. It can be either it ends up eating a lot more time up front than they thought, or they actually don't take the time up front and they don't get as much value out of the software or service as they could and they should. And then that causes them to think that maybe it's too expensive or whatever the case. So that's an interesting phenomenon and challenge, I think, to keep top of mind as you're going through due diligence and through implementation. What features are custodians and software platforms not offering that people believe they should? I like to look across at the differences in response here across generations, right? I think interestingly, you can see that just 24% of Millennial and Gen Z advisors were worried about custodians offering alternate and alternative investment options, whereas that was more important with older advisors. And my takeaway here is that the value proposition amongst this advisor community is changing as we move on to the next generation. I think we find that younger advisors are more focused on, and I kind of indicated this in past slides, things like financial planning, things like client service, and their value proposition is moving farther and farther away from being a portfolio manager, right? I think that's interesting and reflective in this data. Okay. And that was my last slide. So that was the bit on technology. I'll be back to talk a little bit more about kind of prevailing trends and some of the responses we had around hot topics like AI. But before we do that, I'll turn it over to Devin to talk more about how you all are spending your time.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, as mentioned before, in a past life, I was an advisor and part of the XY community. So I always enjoy these opportunities to kind of get back in the mix and engage a little bit. I miss a lot of what you guys get to do every day, although I love what I do every day. So yeah, I mean, at this point, we looked at kind of how advisors are using technology. I think we also wanted to better understand how advisors are spending time. Oh, thanks, Allison. Overwhelmingly, you can see that financial planning is like the primary source of time spent, or the area the advisor is spending most time, sort of, at least for this modern independent advisor that we've surveyed. So throughout the survey, I think we see pretty fair amount of, or maybe just like a lack of consensus across responses, not everywhere, but in a lot of places, which makes some sense. But this is one of really the only areas where I think we've got like this overwhelming consensus among advisors. At 15%, we've got investment related tasks, followed by client facing tasks, 10%. And I think you can draw a number of conclusions from the data, but what stands out to me is that, financial planning is it's really hard to automate. And it's also the primary reason that clients hire you as an advisor, right? They want a human that understands all the qualitative stuff, their family dynamics, goals, their aspirations, basically the stuff that a computer really can't right size in a plan development process. So it makes sense to me that this is where most of the advisor's time is being spent, but it's also interesting to think about how much of this has probably changed over the past couple of decades, and that this is likely a change that's going to persist over time, especially as we see technology and AI kind of absorbing a lot of the quantitative and repeatable aspects of what we would historically consider to be an advisor's value proposition. So I thought this is kind of an interesting place to start here. We also looked at how technology correlates with the places advisors are spending their time. And we found that basically more technology equals more time spent on financial planning and less time spent on things like billing, investment, tasks, compliance, et cetera. So in other words, the more that technology enables the advisor, the more time they can spend on the aspects of their value proposition that actually require that sort of human touch and intervention, which again adds up. So what's preventing advisors from spending more time in that qualitative realm with clients? For 5%, nothing. They just don't want to, I guess. I'm not totally sure. But really, it's the things that are either really hard to automate, like client service and compliance work, or things that advisors have just chosen not to automate, like portfolio management and administrative tasks. And so you kind of interestingly see how these break across genders as well, but makes enough sense here to me, at least, minus maybe that 5%.
Well, maybe those 5% feel they are spending enough time, right? They don't need more time. I don't know.
It's possible, and we'll continue, and maybe we see some of those 5% show up in other places too. But regardless, when you look at how much time advisors are spending communicating with clients and focused on financial planning each week, the overwhelming majority are spending close to half of their week just on these two categories alone. So there are a few that are spending more than 40 hours a week on one or the other, and maybe that's some of those 5%ers from the previous slide. I'm not totally sure, but maybe some calendaring help, or we could get them cleaned up a little bit there. But generally speaking, those are the two areas people are spending most of their time. So summarizing this section, I think what we find is that, again, unsurprisingly, more clients equals more time communicating with clients and more time spent on financial planning. To a point, there is sort of a bell curve relationship here, but what's indisputable is that higher growth firms are spending more time communicating with clients than slower growth firms. And I think that's obvious, but it's something worth dwelling on. I think the details there, outside of just having a higher volume of clients and folks to speak to and serve, that likely is a cause and effect there. You can go ahead, Allison. So with that sort of understanding of, one, how the advisors are using technology, how they're spending their time, we also wanted to understand a little bit better just what the makeup of these client relationships looks like today. So we asked advisors what they feel that clients consider to be their most important value proposition, and the top three answers were laid out there. So investment strategy, trusted investment brands, and relationship down near the bottom, returns, fees, and added services. But again, there's some relative consensus across this group. You can go to the next, Allison. But when you kind of look at this by the advisor's AUM, you start to see some interesting differences. So advisors that are managing more AUM tended to feel more strongly that their greatest value as an advisor is investment strategy, fees, returns, things in that realm, while advisors managing less AUM were more likely to say that their clients valued trusted brands, their relationship, or additional services that they were providing. So I think, again, you can cut this data a bunch of different ways, but my take here is that when you're smaller or managing less AUM, getting started, whatever, you're going to lean into established brands. You need to build credibility, or you feel the need to build credibility, and this is a path of least resistance. Focusing on added services and the quality of your relationships. Those are controllable ways that you can create some competitive advantage. But it is interesting to see that as firms grow, these values can kind of change a bit. And we see that represented here in the data. So interesting takeaways there.
Oops, sorry, I skipped ahead a little too much. Here we go.
It's okay. Go back one. Yeah. Oh, sorry. No, you're right. Okay. We're on the same page. Okay. So looking at how advisors communicate with clients. So generations varied significantly. And surprisingly, at least to me, older advisors prefer video conferencing at a pretty like non-trivial rate of difference compared to younger advisors. So I thought that was an interesting take. Second, we see really younger advisors are just more likely to use phone or in person, which maybe, I would say speaks to their desire and maybe even out of necessity to meet prospects, clients, where they are in life as opposed to just like focusing on building and growing their firm. So I don't know. This would have been really interesting to have this data 4 or 5 years ago. I think COVID changed a lot for everybody, and some folks were begging to get out of their home office, and some folks probably found a lot of comfort there. Maybe folks a little later in their career enjoyed the time at home and have sort of carried that through. But again, very interesting to see sort of the differences in responses. You can go ahead. The interesting thing, though, is that the fewer clients an advisor served, the more likely they were to communicate via email, and the less likely they were to meet in person. So in other words, what we see is that more clients tends to correlate with more intimate communication methods, which is not surprising. But again, it just is one of those things that you're probably not actively considering on a daily basis. And I think it ties back to some of the things we covered earlier about just the focus on financial planning and communication over some of those more automatable or less human value add elements of the business. We also looked at top stressors reported by advisors. So we basically asked, 2 questions. One, what stresses you out about running your business? And then a second question, which is what do you think clients find to be most stressful at this moment? And you can see there's not a lot of consensus here again, but for advisors, I think, they're feeling most stressed by a mixture of economic factors, which is probably always present, just in sort of a different shape or form. And then more personal challenges to their business, right? Interest rates, client retention, building their client base, market volatility. These are kind of the top 4 answers there. But then finally, we asked the question I mentioned before is, what do you believe your top stressors are for clients? And again, not a ton of consensus, but the takeaway for me is really that, both clients and advisors are just worried about a lot of things. And a lot of things on this list are pretty much out of their control. So this tells me, and, going back to days of being an advisor, that there's a great opportunity to educate clients and then to realize the ongoing responsibility of continuing to educate them over time about the importance of minimizing things that are completely out of their control and really tying back to your value proposition, reinforcing the value of a plan that accounts for best and worst case scenarios. So interesting section there. I think that's it for me. I think I'm giving it back to Tom to cover the final section here.
Great. Yeah. Thanks, Devin.
Yep.
We're gonna do AI and other trends.
Yes, I previewed this. And yeah, thanks, Devin, for going over the behavioral stuff. I think that's all like hyper relevant, I'm assuming, for this audience. But the last area of focus for the survey was, and this is one of my favorites, is to kind of hear about what trends are on your mind. And I think it's great for you all to understand what other people are thinking about and kind of understand what is on the bleeding edge of maybe the business as we look forward. We'd be remiss if we didn't touch on AI. I think every conference, webinar, interview I hear in our industry these days touches on AI. And I'm being a bit facetious, but I think the answer is clear from this first slide why that's the case, right? We surveyed this group about AI usage, and we found that 80% of folks in your seat are using some form of AI, and of the 20% that are not, 64% plan to soon. So, I mean, the takeaway here is obvious. AI, the movement of implementing AI tools in advisor practices is here. It's upon us. And I think we're kind of just in the early innings as we move to the next slide and see kind of the trends on how these things are being used. So here are the most common specific use cases. You can see assistance with client service tax, creating personalized client communications, assistance with marketing efforts. This to me feels like kind of the low-hanging fruit when you think about the kind of operational leverage that AI tools can create. And taking time and work off of advisors' plates for kind of menial, non-revenue generating tasks makes a lot of sense. But again, I think is kind of really just the early innings on where we think this can make an impact long term. And then more specifically, kind of cutting this by generation. So we've been kind of playing the millennial Gen Z advisor versus the older advisor against each other to see how trends are evolving and how behaviors are evolving. And then to me, what this indicates, like we see the most dispersion here on the far left, assistance with client service tasks. To me, this feels like maybe the next layer deep, right? So the first kind of low-hanging fruit is around helping with client communications, using kind of LLMs to write emails and maybe do some low-lift marketing. But when it gets into the deeper things, like really digging in and assisting with client service tasks, I think what's apparent here is that the younger advisor is an early adopter, right? That's why we're seeing kind of the difference. And so I think as we see things evolve, we expect the Gen Z and millennial advisors to be kind of leading the curve as it pertains to implementation of AI tools. The next piece was on retirement. So this is near and dear to our heart. You heard in kind of my bio introduction that I manage not only our custody and wealth business, but also our retirement practice. So we kind of see this playing out in real time. But similar to AI, we surveyed this advisor base to understand what percentage of folks are currently doing retirement plan business, which we would define as 401k deferred compensation business. And we found that over 80%, so almost exactly the same as AI adoption, over 80% of these advisors are doing some amount of 401k business today. And of the 20% that are not, a huge percentage of those folks plan to in the near future. And, we've done, like I said, a lot of work on this. We've talked a lot about this idea of the convergence of wealth and retirement and the reasons why. What we're seeing is that many advisors are doing this as sort of a natural evolution of wanting to own more and more of their client's financial picture, right? So we see a shift from advisors that are focused on portfolio management to those that are more focused on financial planning and long-term planning. We know that retirement assets and retirement planning are a huge part of that picture. And so it makes sense that the wealth-focused advisors are naturally wanting to do more and wanting to take more official responsibility for the retirement plans. And I think it's yielding better, more valuable results for advisors at large. So great to see that the numbers are kind of supporting hypotheses around the convergence of wealth and retirement. And then lastly, I just like to flash helpful resources. So we surveyed this community just to understand what sort of media, press, thought leadership, social they're consuming. So for those of you who I guess are just getting started and want to understand how to get plugged into the industry, we know that this is a tight-knit community that likes to idea share and likes to ideate on best practices. So if you're not kind of attending this slate of conferences, if you're not plugged into these social media platforms and following these professional networks, you'll see one of those we've included, of course, is XYPN. Then I would suggest you do so. And I think it'll keep you on top of trends and what folks are talking about, and give you lots of ideas for how you can continue to evolve and do things better. And that was our bit on trends. So that kind of wraps survey results, but I'll turn it back over to Allison to kind of wrap us up. And then, of course, to the extent there's questions, we're happy to address those.
Great. Thanks. Yeah. So if there are any questions, please feel free to write those in the chat, and we'll address them at the end. So just to wrap up everything that Tom and Devin covered today, there's obviously a ton of data here, and we can share the full survey with anyone who's interested in a deeper dive, but we wanted to just highlight some of the key takeaways here that are the trends we identified that can kind of help you think about where to go with your practice. So first, the rise of the millennial continues. So this kind of next generation of advisors that we surveyed are growing quickly. They're taking advantage of technology, and they are serving millennial investors who are quickly becoming high value clients with the generational transfer of wealth that's on the horizon. The second key point is that technology allows advisors to offer better client experiences. I think no surprise to this group, but 43% of advisors said with more time, they'd focus more hours on financial planning and meeting with their clients. And so we really, again, see technology as key to creating that operational leverage and giving you that time back. And then on the trend side, AI and technology are widespread, with 4 out of 5 advisors already using it and many more intending to. So it's important to kind of think about how you can incorporate that into your business and what value it could add with different types of tasks. And then lastly, more and more advisors are thinking about retirement and 401k services as critical, not optional, with more than 80% already managing them. And then of those who aren't, the majority intend to, especially if they're working with clients who are business owners and looking to set up a 401k or upgrade their 401k. So those are kind of 4 of the key themes that we wanted to close out with. And again, we'll provide all the full data, and we look forward to tracking these trends year over year as this becomes an annual practice for us, and we can see how things continue to change and evolve over time for this community as advisors continue to grow. So with that, we do have some time left here for Q&A if people have any questions. Let's see. All right, one question we have here in the chat, Tom or Devin, I don't know if you want to answer, is what's next for Betterment? So what are we working on at the moment in our upcoming roadmap that might tie in with some of this stuff?
Sure, yeah. So I'll try to decide how specific to be. But I think our focus is on building in more flexibility for advisors around portfolio management, account types, and reporting. I would say those are kind of like the key focus areas. Obviously, part of our value proposition is automate, and we heard from this survey that the less time you are spending on things like portfolio management and administrative tasks, the better. So everything we do is in an effort to make you all more efficient and to provide a better experience to your clients. But we know also that in order to work with you guys in a deeper, more meaningful way, we need to provide more across all those key areas. So getting you the data you need, getting it at your fingertips, making sure we don't have to turn any clients away with any specific account types, and of course, supporting everything you need to do for your clients when it comes to their investment portfolio. So be on the lookout into Q1 and into the first half of next year for some major releases in, I guess, all 3 of those areas.
Great, thank you. Another question that just came into the chat is Betterment still closed for advisors working with non-US residents?
Our policy, and we can follow up with you, but our policy is that clients that onboard to Betterment must have a US-based address and tax ID number. So that would be our official response to that.
Yeah, so our support team can happily answer the requirements there. Okay. I think that's it. So if there are other questions, please reach out. We would love to have a one-on-one conversation or provide any of this data in more detail. And thank you for taking the time to listen in today. So Sarah, I'll turn it back over to you to close us out here.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Thomas, Devin, Allison, for your time today and going through these survey results. It was very enlightening. It's very interesting to see just all the trends that are popping up in this industry. AI is definitely that invasive technology that's out there. So it'll be cool to see how it continues to evolve. But again, thank you so much. If you are interested in learning more or just curious about the Betterment platform, then you are welcome to schedule a demo with them. I'm going to drop the link in the chat below. And then if you are interested in scheduling a call with an XYPN teammate to learn more about XYPN, then I do encourage you to find a time that works best for you as well. Otherwise, once you close out of this webinar, a feedback survey will pop up. Please do take a moment to rate us and suggest any of the topics that you are most interested in seeing. We love data, we love feedback, and we want to make this as valuable as possible for you also. We'd love to know what you think. Otherwise, thank you again, Thomas, Devin, Allison, for your time, and I hope everybody else has a great rest of their day.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Thank you.